Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
Welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, and I thank you for taking a little bit of time to join with me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. I am joined today by a candidate, and as you know, we love to have the candidates for elected office on our show. It's a great way to bring the information to the people and also a great way to introduce them to Foxborough and all that we are. So this is one such occasion. I'd like to introduce my guest, Michael Toole. How are you doing, Michael?
Good, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great, great. So we here in Foxborough, this is our cable, Volunteer Foxborough Cable Access, of course, brings it to you. And you are a Norton resident, and you also are running for 1st Bristol District for the state representative seat that's going to be coming up in November, correct?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me tonight, by the way.
Absolutely. Well, welcome aboard. Michael Toole, and you are not a stranger to Foxborough. I met you at Founders Day.
Founders Day, yep. And out meeting people at Founders Day. It was a fun first time there. Anybody who missed it missed a great Black Hawk. That Black Hawk was hands down the most impressive thing I've seen in a long time.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I met you before the rains really killed us, so it is great to meet you. Yeah. So hopefully this will be a great way for a lot of people to meet you on our program. So clearly we are running for election. You're on the Democratic ticket?
Exactly.
All right. And in November, when the election comes up, you are going to say, vote for me because why?
Wow, that's kind of hop right into it.
This is the McNeil-Lehrer method of interviewing.
And you know, it's more of a story of time and so forth. You know, when we look at why people run, it's one of probably the hardest decisions. You know, I mean, it took me a while to decide to run.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is. You know, but you can't have complaints about the system and sit on the sideline. You know, and that's really how I felt. You know, we've had representation, the same representative for about 12 years. Mm-hmm. And he's done an all right job locally with constituent work and so forth. But, you know, I felt there were major issues that we, you know, could really focus on, such as education, you know, benefits for working families, issues of equality, and more importantly, you know, mental health has been one of those issues that people just don't really want to talk about, specifically families' mental health issues and veterans. Okay. So, you know, those are just some of the platforms, some of the priorities that I hope to kind of advocate for if elected.
Well, that'd be great. We'll take a deeper dive into each one of those in this program, and I know we're going to go quickly because there's so much to cover. But first, I'd like to not only welcome you, but and your family.
Thank you. Yes. So I have my wife, Kathy, and I have a 12-year-old daughter, Emma, and an 8-year-old son, Nicholas.
And they're all excited about this?
They are. It's, you know, I've got to just congratulate both Emma and Kathy this last Friday. So there's a Personal Best Karate in Foxborough.
Yes.
And they're members of Personal Best Karate over in Norton.
Well, Chris Rapole does such a great job with that.
Yeah, he does.
Program. He's phenomenal.
I mean, and then the charity work that the foundation does too is great.
We've been honored to have them on our show a couple times. We love having Chris here.
Oh, they're good people. But they just got their second-degree black belt, both of them.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah. So Friday was the graduation ceremony, which is great. Both my kids are active, you know, with softball, baseball, and I'm actually the vice president of softball over in.
Well, I just found out that you're a coach, so
coach and.
Being an umpire myself, of course, I'm supposed to not like you, but it's all part of the sport. It's all part of the spirit, so it's good.
Listen, you know, I promise you I won't bump you, all right?
I usually just put my arm around and say, look, I know you disagreed, but you're wrong and I'm right. That's the easiest way to go about it.
You know, it's typically, I have nowhere to argue or nowhere to appeal to, right?
So fantastic, Michael. So I love talking politics, and I love digging a little deeper. So let's scratch the surface and begin with your desire to support working families. So what does that really mean?
You know, it's funny because when we look at it, when you say working families, it's almost, when I put it on a piece of advertising, it's like, it's just so, it almost seems cliche. And what it really is kind of advocating for working families, benefits for working families, making sure that the State House is representing and advocating for health benefits, you know, that aren't going to strap businesses, but are fair to working families. Mm-hmm. Right now, we see the middle class being squeezed more than ever. And, That's really what this is about. I mean, when you get in for public service, it's about helping people, and you see people that are just struggling that you would have no idea they're struggling. You know, you can see the increase of the food pantries within Norton, within Mansfield, and you know, people that are, and there's a certain, obviously, people don't want to depend on those services, but they need to, and that's kind of, you know, when we look at that, you know, making sure that they're working 40 hours, but they're just not, you know, the pay isn't matching up what the bills are. So advocating for them, and that's really very important. You know, right now we've been in a situation where the focus is about just lowering taxes. Well, let's make sure we're doing it responsibly. You know, I think everyone would agree that nobody likes paying taxes. I don't think there isn't anyone who says, oh boy, I can't, the 15th of April, and say, oh, let me just write this out.
That's a pretty safe statement there, absolutely.
But, you know, there are responsible ways of doing that. Making sure that the 3 towns that are in with my district have industrial development corps, like Mansfield, that is very proactive, trying to bring businesses to the area. Other synergies where the 3 towns could have those industrial corps working together to try to bring big businesses in to lower the tax burden that actually would support education and other programs within the town.
And we're going to get to education in a second, and I think now's a good time to mention Michael Toole spells his last name Toole, and that's important because we're going to redirect you to, not redirect, but direct you to his website at www.votetoole.com, VOTETOOLE. And of course, you can reach out to him at votetoole@comcast.net if you have a question, I'm sure, or if you want to lend some support, maybe put out a sign. You can also tweet with him, be his friend on Facebook. You are everywhere, or you can just give a call at 508-406-0119.
Absolutely, I would love to hear from you. It's funny because, you know, you want your name memorized and so forth in the campaign. And I had a friend who's does brand marketing, and he says to me, he says, like it or don't like it, he says, Toole is a very memorable last name. He's like, lose the Michael and just go with Vote Toole.
Right,
and that's, you know, that was the whole campaign and so forth, is the branding of that and my last name, and hopefully people will remember it. So.
Well, I'm going to say Vote Toole, but I'm also going to say Michael.
There you go.
Tell us about education.
Yeah. So, you know, education, we're funny because it's a real complex time, right? The state is increasing funding or paying about $100 million. Right now, the state budget is about $4.5 billion for education. And the state's adding an additional $100 million every year. But because of the interesting time of, you know, special education, and healthcare seem to be increasing at an increasing rate with expenses, that $100 million increase every year isn't keeping pace. And so we really need someone that's advocating for fully funding education. You know, one of the areas that's always very controversial, especially in this area, is we have a very successful charter school. Okay.
The Foxborough Regional Charter School.
Yeah, the Regional Charter School.
Sure.
They do a great job over there. And, you know, when charter schools were designed, they were originally designed, you know, the concept of charter schools go back to the 70s out of UMass. And they were originally implemented about 10 years ago, or, you know, actually a little more than that. And it was supposed to be a feeding ground for public schools. And, you know, right now we're in a situation where the funding isn't keeping pace on the public schools, but we want to raise the cap for charter schools, which would dilute the funding. So we have to make sure there's a balance there and make sure that we're fully funding public schools
It's
first.
interesting you mention that, because there's a strong argument to be made that the funding per student is not an equitable amount, because the charter schools don't have to provide all the infrastructure, they don't have to provide the special education services, they don't have to provide the wide variety of services, simply because a charter school can be focused. They can have an academic bent, they can have a services bent, they can have a drive towards the arts, which makes them absolutely a desired educational opportunity. But by virtue of the fact that they are so focused, they of course eliminate a lot of the extraneous pulls on the budget, so a per student funding mechanism isn't necessarily the best. So how do you think that would be addressed?
Well, I think part of it is looking at programs and technologies to make sure that the schools are matching up with technology and where there's savings within there. I know I've had a chance to meet with Dr. Bader over in Norton, and he's really kind of advocating for technology and driving it as kind of resources, offering curriculum that is outside there. But this is where I get very problematic about charter schools, is when this is publicly funded education through the charter schools. However, they're not willing to, they say that their curriculum's copyrighted, and they're not willing to share it with the public schools.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's a very troubling thing for me, to be honest with you. You would think that this is public education and it's, publicly funded. Why aren't they sharing the curriculum?
Particularly since the public school system, in fact, here in Foxborough Cable Access, we broadcast all their school committee meetings. They're elected, and their curriculum is certainly is cussed and discussed and vetted and reviewed. So,
right, and I respect that they have this creativity. And that's, something, I had a teacher come up to me and share that story with me, and she was very frustrated. She said, I wanted to come bring back, obviously they're doing successful in certain areas. I wanted to bring some of that success to the public school and didn't have access to it. So those are one of those areas that, last thing I want to do is shut down a charter school,
Right.
because they have their mission. But it's, how do we balance it, and how do we feed the public schools to improve our public schools, which was the original mission of charter schools.
So I'm here talking with Michael Toole, and that's a fantastic way, because what I want to do is, and recently in the Foxborough Reporter, there was a discussion, and we have a wonderful superintendent here, Debbie Spinelli, and the opioid crisis that's striking everywhere. We in Foxborough are not immune, and for those of us who think we are, well, you're just wrong. And to that extent, it's a discussion worth having. So maybe we could talk about opioid abuse, the issues, and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, one of the good things about it is it really is starting to, awareness is starting to get out there. And, even the governor is I don't think, addressing it to its full funding amount, but he is addressing it, which is always a positive thing. But one of the things that we see is, we see a lot of the State House, we see a lot of initiatives, but very little advocate. You say, okay, there's this mandate, but there's very little funding behind that mandate.
The unfunded mandate.
Yes.
And
it's probably one of the most troubling things in government as a whole. But how can we use resources that are already out there? That 120 was always the number, right, that we see per month. Now it's creeping up to 150. And I think it's one of the main focuses of my campaign is talking about mental health and the opiate problem. I have a good friend, John Green, who was basically just recently did a program here in Foxborough. No First Time is the name of his program.
And I think that was mentioned also in the Foxborough Reporter. And fair disclosure, I am a columnist for the Foxborough Reporter, so let's be clear.
There we go.
It's all good.
And John unfortunately lost his son, Evan. I grew up with John, and he lost his son to opiates, and it was the worst kind. He knew it was happening, but tried to stop it, and it just kind of overtook him. And it's just so sad. But we see that story. We hear on the police blog. Weekends. It's like, okay, how many overdoses do we seeing this week? And advocating for one of the things that advocating for these services is very, very important, but also funding to kind of match these task force to address this. We are going to pay for the opiate epidemic.
Well,
either before or later, now or later.
I was going to say, it's an interesting dilemma, because the cost is so cheap and the supply is so plentiful, and then with the introduction of that fabulous tool, Narcan, which allows public safety and police to save so many of these overdose victims, it seems to be both cycling, and at some point, you're right, it is going to come to a head to the point where it's going to cause significant economic
stress,
public health, and the breakdown of families if it's not addressed in a proactive way. And I don't know what the answer is. It's an interesting issue.
I don't think anyone really does, but I think the starting education programs early is very key. And it should be a statewide program and a statewide initiative that we're going to be doing this. Is there an investment within DARE that can expand, that could maybe take on the opiate at such a young age? But we see it that 8th, 9th grade year where that transition where we're seeing it, and it usually starts with exposure to prescription pills, and then kind of leading into others.
And of course, when you and I were growing up, it was exposure to alcohol and exposure to other drugs, pills, and everything else. So it's not a matter of this is such a new thing that nobody knows what. I think it's more this is a new thing that is different than what we've been exposed to before. And unfortunately, kids will experiment. And also, I think there's that piece of it which is becoming more and more in the news of the overprescription of opioids as a pain relief, and then the acceptance of society and maybe the dependence of society. So that's another interesting angle where the physicians, of course, are being encouraged not to. And then I know that the Boston Globe did a series on the overprescription of it, and so I think it's a more it's a much deeper. It's not just a simple dare solution of just saying no. It's much more insidious and ingrained, and so much work needs to be done.
Yeah, and I don't think I apologize if that's what you.
Oh,
it is,
no,
it is
no,
more
that
in
was
education.
me.
Yeah, it's more in education. I think.
But it all starts with education at all levels.
Right?
Doctors,
with the scripts,
parents,
everything else.
teachers.
We saw this with alcohol in probably the 60s and 70s. It was, I come from a family that have suffered from alcoholism, and one of the tough things that was out there was, oh, don't talk about it, right? This social taboo of not talking about it. And that's one of the first things that we have to make sure that we're having those conversations about this. Where alcohol, it's people got away from it. Now it's kind of saying, okay, you can have that conversation.
It's an amazing time, isn't it, though? Because we're talking more openly about so many different things.
Yes.
Transgender, sexual abuse, opioids and alcohol abuse, where the thought back in the 60s and the 70s was we didn't want to talk about it, we didn't want to bring embarrassment upon our families, but now I think it's more accepted that there are bad things going on, and the best way to at least understand it and begin addressing it is through education and talking about it. So a lot of credit goes to everybody for having a more maybe enlightened is the word approach. So anyway, fantastic. I want to again remind everybody I'm speaking with Michael Toole, who's running for the 1st Bristol District seat in the November elections here in Foxborough, Norton, and Mansfield. Now the district covers all of Norton.
So it actually is District 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
2, 3, and 6 in Mansfield. Poor Mansfield. Mansfield has 3 representatives. So 2, 3, and 6, and then all of Foxborough.
Okay.
So Foxborough is hands down, obviously.
So we're easy.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it. All right, very good. So we talked about opioids, but let's also talk hand in hand. There's a physiological component to that with pain medicine prescription. We have aches. Yep. We have recovery from major injuries. I was prescribed something I couldn't take because it just made me go loopy. So I never did. But what about mental health issues? That's a huge issue nowadays, particularly in the news of the courts maybe not addressing them or not able to address them. But even more so, the Spotlight series that just came out in the Boston Globe, starting this past Sunday. I apologize. A Sunday in June is when this started, depending upon when you're watching this. But very, very interesting and startling information regarding the ability and the inability, legally as well as financially, of our state mental health system to address the needs of the populace. So let's talk.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what we started talking about. It's about bringing up the subject. A politician, for lack of better words, talking about mental health. I mean, it was one of those taboos, And when I spoke to people and said, "Well, what do you want to really talk about?" I said, "I want to talk about mental health because it's one of those things that 25% of all Americans at one point in their life go through a stage. It's actually maybe even a little higher than that, and it's maybe a short term or long term, but it's a very large number, and it's been one of those things that once again we're back to taboos."
Sure.
And what we have to do is we have to kind of address this and make it aware that there are going to be stages where people go through that and they need support. It's coming from seeing people that I've known that have suffered from bipolar. Things are going great, but when it goes wrong, it's going to be like a tidal wave of just problems that kind of follow them, and something they need help right then and there. The problem is right now our system is very bogged down, to get that help, and something it's usually it's state programs that we need to see, And it's one of the biggest, when we see my opponent, one of the what's really kind of bothersome to me is, when we talk about fundings, he didn't really want to fund children's mental health. Right, and it's a very obvious thing, and he must have his reason and so forth. But that's a very glaring thing for me for children's mental health. It's a very early thing that should be fully funded. But if you look at kind of that track record, you see that, and we see that now that with the governor that's in place now, we're going to see more and more cuts within that mental health. I think they may be shifted around for maybe the opiate, but we need to make sure we're not, fixing one problem at the cost of another.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's always a big struggle, I would imagine, up on Beacon Hill, is taking the resources, which are limited, and some years are plentiful and some years are not plentiful. And depending upon how the cycle goes, there's also many competing demands. So that's not a job that I'd ever want. Good for you for wanting to do that. So what is your primary driver, and why do you want to do this?
It's what, why, that's what my wife asked me. She's like, you really sure you want to do this? And I said, oh, no, this is, the idea of being a public servant and being able to solve people's problems. It's really it's a very dear thing. And I think you really have to have a determination to do that. Especially not all problems are a financial problem. We talked a lot about finances tonight.
We're going to talk about it a little bit more in a second.
Absolutely.
So there we go.
But advocating for those things of working families, education, you're feeling that you're on the right side and advocating for them. That's why you want to do it, to bring change. That change might be small, but it always starts with someone trying to bring change.
So good. So I'm going to ask you one more question because I'm very interested in your thoughts on the economy, taxation, how Massachusetts, what the approach will be, where your management approach is as far as where your philosophy lies. But of course, I'm speaking with Michael Toole, who is running for the 1st Bristol District of our state House of Representatives, and he is always willing to talk to you. You can be calling him at 508-406-0119. You can reach out to him by email at VoteToole. Remember, Toole. Don't forget the E on the end, at Comcast.net or www.votetoole.com. Be his friend on Facebook. Tweet with him, do all that good stuff. But you don't need to tweet about the economy because we're going to ask him about that now. Where do you see the economy going with Massachusetts taxation, and where do we end up? And I guess I'm going to ask also, because it's not in our district, but it is pretty close by, the casino that's being proposed in Taunton and the current Plain Ridge Casino for the slots. That does play in locally as far as the overall picture. So maybe we'll use this as our segue to find out what you think.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
Jobs versus taxation, and when we look at it, the number of jobs that it will bring to the area are great. One of the things that I fear that Plain Ridge has done a good job is making sure that it's not a tax on the poor, and I think that's very important to make sure this isn't just a gaming on the tax on the poor.
Of course, one could argue that that is what the lottery is, the state lottery.
It is, absolutely.
But then that, of course,
the most successful lottery in the country.
And then that is a major funding source of the state education program, which then brings us back to the conversation we had 20 minutes ago about funding educational initiatives. Tough, isn't it?
It is.
Everything is interrelated, and there's always a push-pull.
Right.
That's why I still don't envy you this opportunity. So good for you for doing it.
And we see certain initiatives that we'll see on the ballot this year, the millionaire tax and so forth, that's looking to fund. It's looking to fund education and transportation. While it's an initiative that it's almost goes back to the Warren Buffett clause. They said, Warren Buffett back with Obama said, I don't pay enough tax.
Right, he did say that.
And it's funny, I was reminded of that recently, and this kind of almost matches that, where really it's about 1,200 people paying a little more increase for the education and transportation side. But that's one initiative. Obviously, the casinos. I think I'll be surprised. It's funny. It seems like they just keep, especially Everett and in Taunton, they keep being proposed, but they don't seem to break ground, which is kind of interesting. I was surprised. I thought when the economy came back that people would have gone, something. Maybe this isn't a good idea, but something. I really do support the idea of the jobs that would come along with it. So. And
of course, Foxborough resoundingly voted against it, 60 to 40%, and our
absolutely
our de facto referendum, which was really our selectmen's race. So it's a great message here. We here in Foxborough sent loud and clear a couple times because we also had a proposal for a racetrack, and it was also went down to defeat 60 to 40%. So pretty consistent here in town.
Yeah.
So with that, we have the. I guess I'm going to say, what sort of drivers to the economy are you excited about? What enthuses you about where we're going in the state?
Yeah, I love the idea that GE's coming here. You know,
Sure.
when we look at
huge influx in the Marlborough area and Boston, right?
Absolutely.
And
And we're looking at jobs. You know, one of the things that I hope that the tax loopholes that they've kind of fallen in, the corporate tax loopholes, get closed up a little bit. But the deal that the governor, and the city of Boston specifically, has worked out with GE seems to be very, very positive. I would love to see. I don't think we have enough large business. We have a huge education pool here, a skilled labor, but I don't think we're pulling enough large corporations here. You know, you look like states in Minnesota that have Target and Best Buy, and areas, some large corporations, Pillsbury, I believe, is there as well. We're not pulling those large corporations here. And I think that's where I would love to, in this area, work on the industrial development corps to see what we can do are there state grants that we can give these groups to try to attract businesses here.
Great.
The more business we pull, obviously, the less burden it is on the taxpayers as a whole.
That is the idea, right?
Yeah. And
I'm going to give you the final word here. We are so out of time, folks, and I apologize to Michael because I love talking to you and I love talking about politics, but we're going to give you the final word. I'm going to remind everybody one last time, Michael Toole is running for the 1st District. He wants your vote, and if you want to learn more about him, not only you have to look at this program, you can come back here at www.fcatv.org, click the links for Foxborough Central, and you can check this out again. But you can also get in touch with him directly at 508-406-0119. Email them at votetoole@comcast.net. Check them out on the internet at www.votetoole.com. Be his friend on Facebook. Check him out on tweet. It's all good, right? Speaking of good, let's hear the last word.
So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for having me tonight. I wish one of the opportunities I could have is really being able to meet every citizen within the district. I'm out banging on doors. State rep races are knocking doors and basically meeting people. And that's what I'm trying to do. It's part of the reason why I was excited to come on your show. This is obviously you have a great medium to meet people, not face to face, but get to know who I am and my face. And, I'm looking to earn their vote for November. And basically I'm trying to bring, fresh ideas to these changing times, and that's really the message that I want to get out there. That these are going to be fresh ideas. It's not every. I'm not going to have the answer to every problem, but we're going to tackle it, and we're going to basically make this district better, and hopefully attract more business that will basically pay dividends to education and maybe some of the other social issues that we're having in the area.
Fantastic. Michael Toole, thank you so much for coming out with us.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for staying with us and enjoying our interview with candidate for our representative for the 1st District. What do you call it? Court?
First Bristol District for the General Court.
Thank you very much. I knew court was in there somewhere. I'm so out of time. I want to thank you. I'm Bob Hickey on behalf of my volunteers here, Betty Travers, Deb Stores, and Paul Beck behind the glass. Have a great day, Foxborough. Take care.